Hello and aloha and welcome to History 241 Civilizations of Asia, Session 17 that deals with the Qin Empire and the Qin State from about 221 BC to 206 BC. My name is Abdul Karim Khan. I teach here at Leeward Community College, and please check the WebCT for my latest email address as well as the phone number, and contact me whenever you want and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Also on WebCT, please check any assignments that might be coming or the schedule that you need to follow. So please check again and again the WebCT if I have any messages for you, or you have anything that you need to take care of on WebCT. So download the schedule, the assignments, the course syllabus, so that you know what is coming up. Let's see what we have today. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Qin State and the Qin Empire from about 221 to 206 BC. And let's see first what we did last time, sort of a review of the previous session. Last time we talked about the Zhou Dynasty and especially the times of trouble during the Warring States period from about 475 or 480 to 221 BC. How the Zhou Dynasty got into trouble and how these different states started the trouble for the dynasty, and not only just for the dynasty but for themselves and the whole entire China. And then it was during these times of trouble that you see the rise of the different philosophies in China, because so many problems there were. At the same time, people came up with some solutions, and those solutions, as we said, turned into philosophies. So different solutions for various problems that the Chinese were suffering at that time because of the Warring State period. And the three major philosophical thoughts or philosophical schools out of 100, they lasted for long, or longer than anyone else: Confucianism, Taoism, and Legalism. So these were the three major philosophies at that time. However, Legalism proved to be much more successful, especially with the ruling classes, particularly with the emperors and the empire and the dynasties. So of all the dynasties, in fact, legalism was the more adopted philosophy by the dynastic rulers. Now, we talked about legalism as a very, harsh system for a couple of reasons. Number one, the legalists believed just in rule and ruling very strong. That was one. The second thing was that they did not really take care of the people, or even if they did, that was not the intention. So they believed in tough order, security, peace, no opposition, no disturbance of anything. That was one type of interpretation of legalism. Another thing that the legalists did, they focused much more on the defense, on the military, on the strength of the dynasty, how to make dynasty survive longer than normally it would. So those were the dynastic securities. That was like a bigger concern in the legalist thought. They were also, as I said, very tough, particularly on crimes, very harsh punishments, and some of these punishments, they turned them into art or science of torture, as we would talk about. So a very strong, very, powerful dynasty. However, of all the dynasties in Chinese history, this was, a very short-lived dynasty compared to Zhou Dynasty that, ruled for more than close to 800 years. That's just like for ruling, forever. But this one, it ruled only, for a few decades and then disappeared because of its own harshness, because of its own particular mindset, the legalist mindset. And so let's see what is there in today's session, sort of introduction. We will start with the rise of the Qin Dynasty, although spelled as Q, but pronounced as CH. So whenever you see the Q, pronounces at CH. So the rise of the Qin dynasty, and how this Qin dynasty created the first Qin or the Chinese empire. How this dynasty, the Qin dynasty, militarily and politically unified entire China, which never had happened before, but they did it. And this dynasty, the Qin dynasty, adopted legalism as their state philosophy. Every dynasty had its own philosophy, so this one adopted legalism. And it was under this dynasty that a lot of people were tortured. You see big time oppression, especially of the opposition and other people in China. And then it was basically this oppression and torture that the Qin dynasty itself came to an end, because not many people could stand it for too long. And particularly when the great leader of the Qin dynasty died, the fourth leader, when he died, then you see a lot of insurrections and rising and uprising on part of the people, common people, which led to the chaos and the confusion and the conflict, in the country, and that just brought down the Qin dynasty. So, we say Qin and China. Just at the outset, I should tell you that China, which is much more a European term or a Roman term, it was basically it was this time, the 200 BC period, that's the 200 years before the birth of Christ, that the Qin dynasty was in power. It was ruling China, and so the Romans came in contact, with China, and it was, to the Roman, it looked like this was the land of the Qin, because the Qin dynasty was ruling, and it was for that reason they started calling that country as China. So, which simply to the Roman, it meant the land of the Qin people or the land of the Qin dynasty. Hence, the name of the dynasty for Europeans and outside China, the name of the dynasty became the name of the country, Qin, China. Okay, let's see further. The Qin state and the Qin people. The Qin state, it existed way before it came into prominence as a ruling state or as the leader of entire China. So it existed close to about 300 years before Christ. And of course it came to end 200 years after Christ. This Qin dynasty, it was located in a very strategic place, the Wei Valley. And we talked about the Wei Valley in the rise of the Zhou dynasty. And Wei Valley, it was in the west, that is on the river Wei, and a little bit secluded. But that seclusion of the dynasty gave the dynasty itself security, because nobody could reach them, nobody could invade them, nobody could attack them, or nobody could bother them. So they focused much more on their own defenses, on themselves, strengthened themselves, and after that, after strengthening themselves, they went after other people and brought them under their control. That was one. So the strategic location was very important where they were living. That is Western China on the Wei River, and this is exactly the same place from where the Zhou dynasty had taken the start. Let's see further. This strategic location, was a mountain situation, and the dynasty and the people of the Qin, they were protected by their mountains. Nobody could, as I said, invade them. There were well-guarded passes that provided access to the Qin people outside, but nobody could get to their place because they guarded them, and if anybody tried to enter the Qin state or the Qin country, then of course they would be taken care of. So these passes provided access especially to the Yellow River Plain, which is agriculture area. So anytime they needed to do business or to bring some stuff, they would go to the Yellow River Plain, and that easy access through their well-guarded passes out of their mountains, that was a good thing for them, so for their location was concerned. Also, the Qin people, they, compared to any other group of people, they were considered to be a bit hardened in fighting, and fighting the northern barbarian, especially the Mongols. So the Qin people, they knew how to fight. They had been mostly fighting and guarding themselves and securing their position, against the Mongols. So that's why when they started their rule in China, they knew how to deal with the Mongols, how to deal with the northern barbarians, as they used to call them, barbarians. So that, in fact, that long training in fighting the Mongols provided them sort of skills to fight other Chinese, other people inside China, and then later on take care of the Mongol invasions very effectively. And so they utilized several strategies to take care of the Mongol problem, who would invade China again and again. And it is for that reason that the Qin dynasty, constructed the Great China Wall that we would talk about. Okay. This is as you see it on the map, the Qin, and here is sort of this western area, the Wei area, and this is the Wei River, and it meets up right here at this bend. It meets up the Yellow River right there, and so this river supported them. So far agriculture is concerned, the mountain that surround them protected them so far, their security was concerned. However, if you look at these 6 dynasties or 6 states, in the north and northeast, these were well exposed to each other. The Qin was a little bit to the west, so not many people invaded them unless and until the Qin wanted to invade one of these, which it did, at will. Sometimes the Qin would make sort of alliance with the Chu or with the Han or with the Wei people or Zhao people to wipe out one or the other, and then later on, as I told you in the last session, they would come and wipe out even their allies. So this was the situation at the time about 480 or 475 BC to 221 BC. These were the 6 states beside the Qin that were fighting among themselves and had damaged, the Chinese unity, the Chinese society. And it was during this period, as I said also, that so many problems there were that somebody came up with some sort of solution for one or another problem. And that one solution was legalism that the Qin dynasty adopted. So I just wanted to show you the warring state area and the warring state, the states that were fighting among themselves, and how Qin came from the west and wiped out all of these that we would see later. So the Qin state and the people, very much, in full control of their place, and they knew what was going on. In fact, they let other states to weaken themselves by fighting among themselves, and later on the Qin would come and take care of them. Let's see further. The making of the Qin Empire. It was the 4th leader, Yin Ying, who came to power at the very young age of about 14 year or 13 year in 246 BC. He was not yet the emperor of entire China. He was, just the leader of the Qin state and of his own people. And when he came to power in 246 BC, and then he ruled up to 210 BC, that's the year in which he died. So Yin Jing was the 4th leader of his state, the Qin state and the Qin people. And he started conquering all these six warring states in about 10 years, from 232 to 221 BC. He, in fact, came up with sort of a justification that if we do not, that is we, the Qin people, if we do not bring all these people under our control, and if we do not unify all China, all these dynasties under the control of the Qin, they would keep on fighting. So that was his justification. that they have been fighting for so long in China, for more than 300 years. Chinese had been fighting, and he believed that was not good. This could also encourage more and more Mongols to invade China. In fact, the Qin people, the Qin State, they were sort of on the forefront or the front line to the Mongols. So whenever the Mongols would invade China, they would invade it from the west. So in the west of China, there were people whom they would call them as barbarians, and anytime they wanted, they would invade. So that's why the Qin were sort of on the front line. So they believed that the Qin should brought all these people under their control, and if not, they would be killing each other, and this bloodletting of the Chinese people by the Chinese people would go on forever. So that was the justification of Yen Jing when he was the king. I mean, when he was the ruler of his state, and he wanted to bring all of them under his control, and that was the justification and his strategy. Let's see further. He unified all China by conquering them in 10 years. And this unification happened for the first time in the history of China, and he brought all China under the Qin Empire and Qin State. Now, we're referring to the people and the state as Qin State and Qin Empire. Now, what's the difference between the two? The Qin State and the Qin Empire. Well, let's see what's the difference between a state or a country and then an empire. The state is the state where you live, or anybody. They live in their own secure borders or within their own frontiers, so they live there, fine, like everybody else. However, when a state or its army or its political leadership, they want to bring other nations, other states, other countries under their control. It could be military control, it could be political control, it could be economic control, or it could be, a combination of all these. So when a state gets out of its own borders and brings other states under its control, that is called making an empire. Just to give you an example, and not too long ago, especially the British, they got out of their island, England, and started bringing other nations under their control. The 13 colonies, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, India, Egypt, places in Africa like South Africa. So when the British went outside the British island, England, and brought other people under their control, that was the making of the British Empire. Similarly, the Roman Empire, when the Romans got out of Romans and brought North Africa under their control and Western Europe under their control, and other places in the Mediterranean area under their control, that was the making of the Roman Empire. Now, speaking of the Roman Empire, there are some very good connections, or sort of these comparison between the Roman Empire and the Qin Empire. Both happened at the same time. The Romans became imperial. That is in 200 years before Christ, that period. The Romans got out of Roman and started bringing other nations under their control, and so they were out in making their Roman Empire. However, the Qin dynasty was doing the same thing, getting out of the Qin state and bringing other states under their control. However, the only difference was, while the Romans were bringing non-Romans, that is non-Italians outside Italy, like Africans or the Arabs or Spanish, under their control, that is bringing other nations under the control. The Qin state or the Qin people, they were bringing Chinese under their control. So the Roman Empire was outside Rome, but the Qin Empire was inside China. So the Roman is called the external empire, but the Qin Empire was called, and is called the internal empire, because the Qin dynasty was bringing, or the Qin state was bringing other Chinese under their control and unifying them. And later on, of course, they would rule them, but after they finished, somebody else came and started ruling the same places and the same people. So that's why when we refer to them as the Qin State, by the Qin State we mean that Western Valley. But when we say the Qin Empire, by that we mean all the Chinese people and the places that the Qin dynasty brought under their control. So let's have that clear, the state and the empire business in the two. Let's see further. Once Yin Ying, he brought all these people, all these warring states under his control. Then he adopted a title, Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang, which literally means the first emperor of the Qin. But that was like the whole China, the first emperor of Qin. Qin Shi Huang. Now we won't refer to him as Yin Jing. Although his friends and his, the leaders of the Qin people would refer to him still as Yin Jing, but more and more people would also refer to him out of respect as the first emperor of Qin, Qin Shi Huang. Let's see further. These are as I said, the different states, and here the Qin is coming and wiping them out, all of them, and uniting entire China. And of course, Qin State grew into power, into strength, and brought most of China under their control. And if you can see, these are the northern, Chinese borders, very much close to Mongolia. Here, the entire, most of the Yangtze River were brought under their control, and further down, later on, China would expand further south, even up to Vietnam. So that would be, this process of expansion and extension of the Chinese would continue. And believe it or not, whatever the Qin dynasty established 200 years back, although it would be extended and expanded to the frontiers that China has now, this was the first unification and the first extension, and this is the same place that we have it now in China. Although a little bit expanded and extended north and south and of course west, but this was as the Qin dynasty established. Still we have almost the same borders in an extended and expanded form. So most of this area would be to the western, to the Western people, European people, or to the Arabs, and the non-Chinese would be known as China, the border areas that the Qin people or the Qin state ruled. Let's see further. The Qin Empire now. We can get out of the Qin state because it's now empire, and here is Shi Huang. And this is from the 221 BC, that is the imperial, when he became the emperor, Qin Shi Huang, the first Qin emperor, and he died in 210 BC. There are, a lot of stories about him, about Qin Shi Huang or Shi Huang. The one story is that he was not really the son of the father. That not the son of the father, that the official history of Huang and the Qin state tell us. So the official history is that yes, he was the son of the father, the ruler of the Qin state. So when his father died, of course he became the successor on the throne. That's the official history. There is another unofficial history that come to us from those ancient times, and that unofficial history is that he was not really even a Qin person. He was a Zhao person, and his family had been captured by the Zhao dynasty, and there somehow there was this one beautiful lady. She was the concubine of a minister. And he was the son of that minister from that concubine. So he was the son of a concubine, and because she was the concubine of a very powerful minister, he gave her, that is, the minister gave this concubine to the ruler of the Qin State. And, you know, maybe it could be she was already pregnant. So Shi Huang was born. And all along he had been told by his mother, by the people, you know, that he was the son of this ruler of the Qin State. And so when the ruler died, he, being the son or the official son of the Qin ruler, he succeeded on the throne and became the ruler of the Qin State. He came to know of this sort of misidentity, and he searched for it. But officially, everybody would tell him, no, you are the son of your father. That is the emperor, the king of the Qin State. But somehow deep down there, he knew that something was wrong and something was not right about his pedigree. Of course, his mom always told him that he was the son of the ruler of the Qin State, but that he lived all along. However, later on, he realized that that was not really important. His personal identity, whose son he was, that was not important. The important thing was to go on and do the right thing, which is to stop Chinese from fighting among themselves and bring them under his control and unify all China under heaven, as he would refer to it, that is under himself, and so that he would become the real, true son of heaven. And like in the mandate of heaven, even if he did not believe in Confucianism, but still, he would refer to himself as the son of heaven and under heaven. So that's the little story of Qin Shi Huang, this great unifier of China. Let's see. A great unifier he is called all along, in Chinese history, and great unifier, of course, he was. No question about that. But at what cost, we can always ask that question. He extended the Chinese frontiers to Mongolia in the north and to Vietnam in the south, or at least that was the direction that he provided to the future generations or the dynasty of the Chinese people, that they would go further north to Mongolia and down south to Vietnam. He conscripted a huge, big, large labor army, labor people as well as real fighting soldiers. So he had a big army, and labor was part of it. You might remember from legalism that the legalists believed in large army, and so because legalism was his dynastic philosophy, that's why he came up with this big army. With the help of this army, he stopped the Xiongnu invasion. These people, the Xiongnu people, these are later on called Han people. The Huns, who were the nightmare of the European people. So many times they had invaded Europe, and so many times they had disrupted European peace, European economics, destroyed so many people in so many places, and the massacre that the Huns would, continue in Europe. And you might know the story. Later on, we would talk about them also, the story of Attila the Hun. That was the scourge or the nightmare of the European people. So Shi Huang, he stood up to this particular group of people. Their identity is a little bit, confused. Were they purely Mongols, or were they Turks, or were they a mix? Most people believe that they were a mixed group of people living in the western side of modern-day Mongolia, the Xiongnu people, and they always terrorized China, and they were really, the nightmare of the Chinese people. It was, in fact, against this particular group of people that Shi Huang, the Qin emperor, came with this idea of constructing the Great Wall of China, and later on other dynasties would extend the wall further east or refurbish it, against the Xiongnu or other Mongol people to stop them from invading China. So this is what it started with. Shi Huang. He built this 1400-mile long Great Wall of China, GWC, that we would refer to it. But he did not, build all the 1400-mile long Great Wall of China. He started the construction, and then later dynasties would extend it to wherever they could and wherever the need was. All right. This is China proper. This is the inner part of Mongolia, which is now part of China, and this is the outer Mongolia as these border exist. And here is the present capital, Beijing of China, and here northeastern China, Manchuria, which is also part of China. Let's see where the wall is. Right there in the red. I don't know how well you can see this wall on your monitor, on your TV, but that's the wall. It started somewhere right here in the west first, and then some of it here, and then some of it there. So if there is going to be any direction, much more first in the west to protect this part of China from the Xiongnu people right here that they would invade. Against this particular group of people, the Mongols that were living right here in southeastern Mongolia, present-day Mongolia, or the inner Mongolia. So the wall was, brought up to here, and then that's how it was slowly and gradually extended throughout history. That's how it reached to the 1400, mile long length. So that's just to show you the extent and the border of the Great China Wall, or the Great Wall of China. I like this picture. It's an old picture, but it tells you, it shows you how, thick this wall is, or how broad the wall is. There are these two Chinese gentlemen, three. One is sitting on the wall. It's a latest picture right here, and it goes on and on and on and on and on, in different parts of China. It's a, I think, picture taken during winter time. And let's see. Okay, Shi Huang, as I said, he unified for the first time northern China, which is the Yellow River region of China. And he unified the North China, the Yellow River region, with that of the Yangtze River and South regions of China. You might remember from the previous section that we talked about China being divided into three natural geographic regions. The North China, characterized by Yellow River, then Central China, sort of Yangtze River, and South China, further south of the Yangtze River. So this was the first time all these three regions were unified under Shi Huang. That's the greatest achievement that any person could achieve at that time. Unified, also this unification was not just only military unification, but also it was a bureaucratic unification. He brought all China under one legal system, that is one philosophy, legalism, and one bureaucratic system that was run by the central government of the Qin Dynasty. And so that's again like there was during the warring state period, that was another problem. So many states, 7, 8 states, finally they reduced to 7 or 6 by the time of Shi Huang. And so each state had its own traditions. Each state had its own dialects or languages and their own laws, of course. So this was, the unification was not only just military, that he brought them under his military control and conquered them, but also he gave them one philosophy, that is legalism, one law, that is the legalist law, and one bureaucracy that was, carried on and supported and ruled by the legalist, officers of the Qin State. So not only military unification, but political, but also legal and bureaucratic constitution. Constitution would be, not really a proper word, but legal unification. So everybody would know what the law was. In different places, one law would work. and one sort of punishments, although very severe punishments, were awarded to even minor crimes. Let's see further. This also ended the Zhou feudalism. You might remember that the Zhou dynasty that preceded the Qin dynasty, it had divided China into different parts or parcels and had given these lands to different people, to the Zhou family and their allies. So that is how land belonged to these different great warriors or wealthy families and states. But under the Qin Empire, all land now belonged to the Qin State. So Shi Huangdi and his legalist system took land out of the hands of the private people, private families or wealthy families, and he brought it under the state control. So it would be now the state to give it to the peasants, to the common people, and see how they would till it, how they would do their agricultural activities. So that's sort of a big difference, that land now belonged to the state, not to private families or private people. This was a big difference. It worked for some time. However, it also created a lot of opposition against the Qin State and the Qin Empire, and against the dynasty, and particularly against Shi Huangdi himself. It created a lot of opposition because under him, or because of him, a lot of families, a lot of people lost the lands that they had been enjoying for more than 800 years. That was the Zhou dynasty. It ruled for 800 years. So these people had been having these lands and enjoying it, and the land had given them power, prestige, wealth in China as anywhere else. So he robbed them of that power. So he weakened the power of the landlords. But at the same time, the dynasty or the legalist system that operated, it was so harsh that he could not befriend the common people, or even if common people were friend of the Qin State and Shi Huangdi, they could not come to save him, or to save his dynasty from falling apart. And so you would see this conflict and confusion later on when he would die. Let's see further. Shi Huangdi had sort of the great, luck to have one of the greatest bureaucratic minds and philosophers, sort of, a great prime minister, Lisi, the legalist. He is also considered to be like the founding father of this legalism, along with somebody else. So Lisi, he was the founding father of the legalist philosophy. He knew the in and out of it because he created it, and now he wanted to implement it. You might remember from the previous session we talked about Confucianism and Confucius, but Confucius did not find a ruler to operate or practice Confucianism. But right here, Lisi, he found a ruler willingly who would operate and act upon his philosophy of legalism, and that was Shi Huangdi. So Lisi, he became the prime minister. The Chinese term is loosely translated like that. He became the prime minister of Shi Huangdi, a great mind, a great person, but extreme legalist in the sense. And later on, he was killed, because he was a very powerful person, and his power also corrupted him. Lisi, he divided China in administrative units, prefectures and counties, and that was to have a better administration in China, so that he would know who was responsible for what area or what unit, administrative unit in China, in different parts of China. So he's given a lot of credit, Lisi, given a lot of credit. He created what is called bureaucratic centralism. That is, states would be controlled, or the Qin State from the center, it would control everybody and everything in China. The state would collect revenues, the taxes from people, and sometimes they were very, burdensome revenues and taxes. Also, he built Shi Huang. He built a great capital, Xianyang, near, present-day Xi'an. It's not too far away from Xi'an, but it's called Xianyang. A capital, and this capital, like other capitals like the Zhou dynasty, whether Western Zhou or Eastern Zhou, this capital represented his power. But compared to the Zhou capitals, this was the capital of, of all times. And he wanted his dynasty or his capital to live for, thousands of generations. So that's why it was a great capital with a lot of boulevards and roads, and he wanted to connect this capital with the rest of China by roads. So he constructed a lot of roads, a lot of bridges, a lot of canals that he did. And so he really wanted the Xianyang capital to be the capital that would represent the power and the strength of all this united China for the first time in the history of China. All right, there is the Qin State, and as it expanded and controlled or wiped out all the other states, it created its own capital, Xianyang, and as I said, it's not too far away from modern-day Xi'an, which is about right here at the bend, the southern bend of the Yellow River. Okay, Shi Huang, he uniformed, he did a lot of other things, weights and measures. He also unified Chinese writing system. As different people use different systems, he standardized the ideograms, and that is how he unified the Chinese writing system. He also unified thought, which meant that he controlled thought. So nobody would think anything else except what Shi Huang wanted them, or his legalist system wanted them to think. So he even controlled people how to think. And he burnt anti-legalism books that were written by Taoist, books that were written by Confucian people or Confucian scholars. So he burned them, all these books, and this is believed to be the first instance of book burning by a state or by a ruler. So he was notorious for all these things. He killed a lot of non-legalist scholars. He burned them alive, in fact. He buried them alive. So he wanted to teach them sort of, if don't mess up with me, I do not want any opposition. This was his message. So, he was a legalist person. He wanted people to obey him. And he created, a very harsh and very torturous type of a system. And he wanted to subjugate people into submission, not only to him personally, but also to his Qin dynasty. He believed that Qin dynasty was the greatest dynasty of all times, or at least at the time, because nobody had brought all China under one unified system, under one control, military, political, or legal control. He did it, and so that's the reason he thought so much of the Qin dynasty. And this was despite the fact that the rumors were that he was not even a Qin person. He was a Zhao person, not a Qin person, but still, he represented the Qin dynasty and the Qin people, and he was the Qin ruler. Let's see further. Shi Huang also heavily taxed people to pay for all these road constructions, the canals that he dug, north and south, and the Great Wall of China. I mean, he had to pay for them, and he taxed people. He drafted a lot of people, rather too many people, for labor services, which meant that they were not free to do agriculture activity or have, free time. So he wanted everybody to spend whatever time they had in his labor services, which people did not like, and that's why so many common people turned against him. This was despite the fact that there was a lot of land available to the people to work on. He severely punished criminals, and this was because of his too much legalism, or the legalist philosophy that he followed. And it was during this time, under the Qin Empire, and especially under Shi Huang that torture became like an art and science. So that's why people say that under, Shi Huangdi, under the Qin Empire, he perfected the art or the science of torture. There are these stories and real genuine stories that come to us from the history of that time, that it was during this time that the Chinese officers who were responsible for torturing people and getting confessions from them, even false confessions, because people were, they wanted to confess and to get rid of the torture. They were killed anyway, but they didn't want to be killed through torture. So they would confess to all the crimes that they had committed or not committed. And so it is during this time, some scholars believe that some of these Chinese officers, jail officers, that they found out what parts of the body would make a person crack or tell all, and even those things that he had never committed. So the body parts that they found out, which one would give the greatest torture or pain to the person. So that's why historians say that it was under Shi Huangdi that the art and science of torture was perfected. Torture even these days, being used in different countries to get confessions or to torture people into submission. But if there is any, in the ancient times, the Romans were also very brutal people, no question about that, with non-Roman people, or if there was any opposition, they tortured people. A common way to deal with criminals in the Roman law was to crucify them, put them on the cross and let them bleed to death. That was with the Romans even for common criminals, that was their punishment. But here, the Qin dynasty was also known for this torture. It stands out, in fact, for torturing people and perfecting the art and science, as they say, of torture. Let's see further. Shi Huangdi, also, when he conquered all of China, now he wanted to conquer whatever there was after death. Think about it. A strange mentality. He believed that there was another world after death, and he wanted to conquer there also. So he created this Terracotta Army, the huge big army made of clay and horses and men, and he wanted to take them with him so that later on all of them, they would be resurrected and come into life, and he would go and conquer, the hereafter. I don't know where that hereafter at that world was that he was thinking. So when he died, a lot of horses and human beings were slaughtered. These were, of course, slaves, that he had captured in warfare, or for whatever reason, they had been slaved. They were slaughtered along with him and buried with him, along with his Terracotta Army. Now, when he died, he had already constructed a tomb for himself and a palace. His particular palace with a golden throne, as the stories are. First, all this stuff, the European historians or non-Chinese historian never believed that there was this Shi Huangdi who had created this Terracotta Army, and there were these horses or men made out of clay, a huge big army, close to about 10,000, soldiers and horses. So non-European, non-Chinese historian never believed this stuff. But all of a sudden, somehow, mysteriously, they found them. In 1974, when some farmer, he was digging some place, and he stumbled on this great discovery, and later on they found not only just one statue, one person, one soldier, but a whole army, and that's why it's called the greatest discovery of the 20th century, the Terracotta Army of Shi Huangdi. Now, they were looking for a long time his tomb and the palace that there was. They found it, but they are afraid that they cannot enter because the same details that give us, the same books, the traditional Chinese history that talk about the Terracotta Army and place everybody in the right place, great details. Those books, they tell us that he had invented a system according to which if anybody entered his tomb or his palace or wanted to touch his throne, there would be these arrows coming at them and killing them. So nobody could dare to enter his tomb or palace. Otherwise, people would rob them, as it happened even in Egypt with the tombs and palaces of Pharaoh. So he had built a defense system, and it was possible with Shi Huang Di. But that scares even today's modern day Chinese archaeologists, not to enter the tomb. And some people say, if we enter there, something might happen and the whole thing might collapse on them, and we won't be able to get anything out of them. So there is a predominant view so far, well, let's not touch them. We know where they are and what they are, but let's not touch them because, if we do, it might collapse or something might happen, some sort of explosion, and that would not be good. So they're very careful, and they don't allow anybody to go there close to the tomb site, or somebody might do something, sabotage or something. So that's the story of the palace and the tomb of Shi Huang Di. Let's see further. He boasted that all this Terracotta Army and his great conquest and the Qin Empire would, all this stuff would last for 10,000 generations. In a way, if you look at it, his boast is true. This is after 2,000 years, we see again at his Terracotta Army, soldiers, and the tomb and the palace. So his boast is in a way for 2,000 years, he's there, and finally his army at least was found. Now where he is or what he's doing, we don't know yet. Till they find him, how well preserved his body might be, we don't know. Could be that he might be placed in some jade, suit that might preserve him. Or the story is that the way he died was also very strange. He in fact went further east to the East China Sea, to that area, and he was looking for an island of eternity. Somebody had told him that if you go to that island, you would live forever. But before you go to the island, you had to take mercury, drink mercury, and then you would never die. And so he drank mercury, but he drank too much of it and he died. And the problem was with Lisi, he's a great prime minister of the legalist mind, the founder of legalism. It became a problem for him that if he had revealed the death of Shi Huang Di, all China would have exploded. And everybody would have revolted because of the way they ruled, very oppressively, very brutally. So Lisi, he kept his body secret and hiding, and he would not reveal that he had died. So he brought the body back to Xiangyang, the capital, and there he disclosed that yes, Shi Huang Di is dead, he has died. And what they did, he forced his, I believe, 17th or 18th son to become the next ruler, the emperor of China. He was not really willing. His older brother was willing, of course, to become the emperor. And he was not acceptable to Lisi and other legalist people. So they asked the older brother to commit suicide, which he did. They forced him, and they butchered all his family so that that 17th or 18th son would rule, but he did not rule for long. Within 4 or 2 years, he was also killed, and the whole dynasty, within 4 years after the death of Shi Huang Di, the whole dynasty collapsed. Okay, let's see further. This is the Terracotta Army. Seen from a little bit far away, but I wanted to give you the full, scope of it. And there are these soldiers, well dressed, ready to go, but go nowhere. They're just ready. You have to march, but there's nowhere to go. And so that's there. And this is, we're looking at them after they were made 2,000 years back. They were made and they're coming to life again. And here is one. Now, the story is that none of them looks like the other person. All of them different. Whether they were made after live people or not, that's I don't know. But the story is that no two person look alike. All individual, soldiers. There are 5 to 6 types of them. Some just foot soldiers, swordsmen, fighters, other or cavalrymen, horsemen, some of them archers, and some of them just workers. And so a lot of them have their different uniforms and different ways of standing or looking, or to show their different positions in the army. This is one photo I have never seen before, and I thought I should share with you. And it shows you that how fragmented these were, and out of all these fragments they're putting together. Some of them, very coming out very clean, but here there is one lying down without the head, so they have to find the head, which is, I believe, right here. And so I wanted to show you that the pukas, or the holes, in the bodies, there they are. And it's a, long, hard work to put them together and bring them, into real position as they were. There are pictures, individual, great soldiers of the Qin Empire. The end of the Qin Dynasty. The Qin rule itself, was a very brutal, oppressive rule, and they're reviled ever since, criticized for their brutal, oppressive rule. However, there are a lot of people who admired them, admired them for unifying all China, bringing them under one legalist order, and giving China order, peace, and prosperity, stopping, the Chinese from fighting. Yes, that's a, some people, they admire them, and some people say, this was a very brutal, oppressive dynasty that used so much torture and brutalized and killed a lot of people. But then a lot of people admire them. The death of Shi Huang in 210 BC triggered anti-Qin revolts. Of course, that was, to be expected. Those people who had lost lands, estates, and dynasties, they started rising up against the Qin dynasty, and they wanted to wipe it out. So the collapse of the dynasty happened in about 206 BC. That is about 4 years after the death of Shi Huang. So that also tells you, how unpopular this dynasty was, and that made it, very fragile and open to criticism, and now open to invasions. So the moment Shi Huang died, you see people rising against the Qin dynasty, and then we would see, who would bring it together. We would talk about that next time. Let's see further. The Qin dynasty, there from not only the Qin dynasty, but from onward, I should say, tell you right in the outset that the Qin dynasty created a pattern in Chinese history, which is called the dynastic cycle, which means the changing of the dynasties in Chinese history. Good dynasty being replaced, the good dynasty replaced bad dynasties under the mandate of heaven. If you remember from the Zhou dynastic rule, mandate of heaven, that heaven would give this authority or power to the good dynasty to kick out the bad dynasty and bring itself into power. This was the mandate of heaven. You might remember we talked about it. It meant a justification for change, political change. And within this change was not really any big change. It was a change of the dynasty. So nothing was changing in China. Only the dynasty was changing, one dynasty following another dynasty. This is a little bit sort of confusing criticism because non-Chinese historians, particularly Europeans, they believe that China never changed. And the Chinese historians say, no, we do change. China did change. Look at all these dynasties, one after another. First the Shang dynasty, and then the Zhou dynasty, and then the Qin dynasty, then the Han dynasty, and then the Tang, and go on and on and on. So many dynasties changed. Is it not change? And the non-Chinese, especially European historians say, yeah, but the dynasty changed, nothing else, So that is not like a big change for non-Chinese historians. So I'm going to leave that to you, what you think about the change. Personally, I think it was a big change. Change in the sense that if you look at the Shang dynasty, yes, it used a lot of jade and bronze, but that was just the beginning. And then the Zhou dynasty that ruled like forever, 800 years, they perfected so many things. And then all of a sudden, the rise of the Qin dynasty at the result of the Warring State period, that is completely a different dynasty. Then the next dynasty that to be followed by the Han, that was sort of a combination of legalism as well as Confucianism. So you see different systems coming into being with the change of the dynasty, although one change that people don't see, and I say that's not a big deal, and that is China, the physical contours of China never changed. That is, somebody did not come from outside like the British or the Romans or the Greeks to seize entire China and change it forever, just like they did, especially the British with India. A comparable size, big population, big country. When the British came to India, they took over entire India and changed it forever. Number one, they introduced Christianity, and first and foremost, they brought democracy. They brought constitutionalism, the rule of a constitution, the British. They brought English language. They brought a sort of their own bureaucracy that unified India. That type of a change never happened in China from outside. So to a lot of Europeans, they say, no, China did not change. Yes, if you compare it with India, then you don't see that type of a change. If you compare China with the United States, how the 13 colonies got into the United States of America, as we see it now, and how this country became from a very agricultural country into how it developed into an industrial country. That type of a change, yes, dramatic change. You don't see in China. How quickly United States became a world power after 1880s or in the beginning of 1900, the 20th century. World power as it emerged, how it fought and won the First World War and the Second World War, and even the Cold War, United States, a big world power. That type of a change you don't see in China, but who knows? History is a huge, big thing. It's a long, long period. And maybe China is changing now and changing very dramatically, from an agriculture country to very industrialized country, and from a very poor country. Of course, a lot of people are poor in China, even today, by any account or by any measure, they're very poor. But at the same time, there are a lot of rich people in China, and all happening under communism. So there is the rise of capitalism in China. Under communism, that I call the red capitalism, because red stands for communism. So there is capitalism growing and rising and developing under communism. So that is a very big change. But for the Europeans and the traditional history of China, there wasn't any change, only dynasty changed. Let's see further. And why this change? That's also another question. Why the dynastic change if there was any change? Well, that was again because of the mandate of heaven. So if anybody did not rule the way they should have, heavens would become upset with them. And so heavens would show its disapproval because the dynasty became corrupt And because of the corrupt dynasty, you see a lot of corruption, conflict, chaos in China. And the political peace and unity was broken because of all this corruption and all that conflict. And so that mandate of heaven was taken from the existing dynasty, in this case, say, the Qin dynasty, because it created a lot of trouble in China, and so the mandate of heaven was taken from the Qin dynasty and given to another dynasty, that would be the Han dynasty, to be followed. Then the Han dynasty would go into corruption, would go into confusion, problems, and so the heaven would take that power and authority called mandate from the Han dynasty and give it to another dynasty. And that's how there would be restoration of peace, restoration of order, and China would come back to itself and it would prosper again. But as you know, nobody rules forever. No dynasty can rule forever. And we have seen, in the history of Europe, like the Byzantine, they ruled like almost forever, But even they lost to the Turks. And then the Turkish Ottoman dynasty or the Ottoman, state ruled for long, but then they disappeared, So empires or states, they rise in power and then they go down. That's history. The rise and fall of dynasties, the rise and fall of empires. Look at the Soviet Empire, how strong that it was. Everybody was so fearful of it. A lot of Western European people and Americans lived in fear and in nightmare, that they believed that anytime there could be some nuclear warfare started between Soviet Union and United States, and they would wipe out each other. That did not happen, and the Soviet Union, thank God, collapsed, without any, again, thank God, without any nuclear warfare. The Soviet Union collapsed. So strong empires that lasted for a long, long time, eventually they collapsed. The Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the British Empire, the French Empire, and so what if the Chinese also, their dynasties collapsed. That is part of history. But in Chinese case, at least, China did not collapse. It is still there. Even if communism collapses in China, and I hope it will, and I pray it will, but China would continue. The Chinese would be there, still there. There would be hopefully a new system that would be constitutionalism, that would be democracy, and people would be much more in power. So that type of a change, if that happened, that would be a great dramatic change in China. So again, this peace and order would be restored to China. Let's see further. We reached the conclusion. In conclusion, we saw the rise of the Qin state and the people. And again, don't confuse the two, the empire and the state. As I said, the state, the empire is when the state gets out of its own borders and bring other people under its control, then it is making an empire. So that's where referring to the rise of the Qin state and people first, and then how the state created the Qin or the Chinese empire, and that is thanks to Shi Huang, the great unifier of China. And as I said, this unification was political, military, but also legal system that he provided of legalism. He also extended the Chinese borders to north and south, and this thing would be kept on. As I said, this expansion would be kept on, but one thing about the expansion of the Chinese border is that this can be sometimes very disturbing to other nations. Because if they, just like what happened, to Tibet, that was never part of the country. Tibet was never part of China. But as they kept on expanding, south and southwest, they grabbed Tibet and made it part of China, saying, well, these are Chinese. Well, Tibetans are not Chinese. They're predominantly an ethnic group of their own religion, Buddhism predominantly, and so they were never part of China, like to be ruled by the Chinese people, but they grabbed, Tibet in 1950s and made it part of China. So this type of expansion is never good. Also, expansion in the West, especially in the Muslim part of China, that is Xinjiang. Due to people that don't like, the Chinese rule, especially the Muslim, they don't like the communist rule of China. And so they're fighting for sort of their own independence or freedom from the communist rule of China, and a lot of trouble, a lot of fighting, a lot of killing. Of course, the Chinese have a big army. They have, weapons, and it's a first-rate army that can take on any problem inside the borders of China. So they're oppressing and suppressing people because these people don't want to live under the Chinese rule or the communist rule. So sometimes this expansion or extension of the Chinese would not be a good thing, would not be a good thing for other people, because this expansion and extension can rob other nations of their freedom and their independence, as it happened to the people of Tibet and as it happened to the people of Muslim people in Xinjiang. All right. Legalism and centralism. Again, legalism, was it good or bad? Well, if you ask those people who really loved this unification of China, one type of a system, yes, they liked it. But legalism, as I told you previously in a previous session, legalism was in fact the philosophy of the rulers. It was not meant for the people. People could even lose their lives under legalism. They could be tortured, and that is how legalism is still treated. Now, the present state, that is the communist state of China, or the communist party of China, or the communist rulers of China, there are a lot of people who believe that this is legalism. In another way, this is legalism because they're very tough, very harsh. They have robbed people of their, freedom, and so the communists are also legalist. And that because of legalism, the tough nature and the oppression that it perpetrated upon people, the Qin dynasty came to an end. And this is the end of our presentation. Next time we would see who would follow the Qin dynasty. Thank you very much for tuning in, and aloha.